the ugly orange. So.
They travel at speeds pushing 200 miles per hour. The very best drivers in the world putting their lives on the line every week. It's time to get the lowdown on this week's contenders, plus a look at the key driver matchups. Right now on Gaughan Racin.
Welcome into the Racin Studios here at the South Point Hotel and Casino. I'm Jeff Motley alongside Brendan Gaughan. And this is a wrap-up for the regular season. This is our last regular season show before we get into the NASCAR playoffs. We've got Indianapolis, the famous Brickyard, coming up this weekend. Before we get into that, we got to wrap up a little bit of the Southern 500 at Darlington, and we've been waiting for Eric Jones to make a breakthrough.
Well, somebody on this studio has waited a lot for Eric Jones.
And she didn't pick him to win.
And she didn't pick him to win this week.
She didn't even pick him to be top three. She got a little money on him, but
she got on the she won the group.
She won a group. She wasn't all in on him. That's our producer, Ann.
Kyle Larson, who I bet the don't line on my parlay on Kyle Larson, and I got the worst case scenario on that hedge. I had the best hedge ever.
He beat all three of those guys, but he didn't
second.
win the race. Finished second.
I had him to win the race. That was absolutely a horrible beat for me. I was very happy for Kyle, but very unhappy on my picks.
Well, when we look at Darlington this past weekend, I mean, we really have waited for Eric Jones to have that breakthrough win. I mean, he had a win at Talladega a year ago, but I think everybody waits for you to win somewhere else, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
At Darlington of all places. I mean, that's
and it's interesting. We've seen guys like Regan Smith got his only career win at Darlington. You just never know what you're going to get there. But Eric Jones is one of those young drivers that doesn't drive like a young driver. He really knows how to manage his car. He doesn't try to put it in places that it shouldn't be. So I think it was very impressive what he was able to do. It also pretty much, I think, is kind of thrown down word to the racing world that this might be Joe Gibbs' world and the rest of her living in it going into the playoffs.
I was just going to say, you can take out Kyle Busch, who we've talked hasn't won since May 2nd or whatever it is. You can take out the fact that we've said Denny Hamlin is the hottest guy in the sport. Martin Truex jumped up there as the hot guy for a month. But it doesn't matter which guy you put in there. Joe Gibbs Racing is the hottest. And let's include Matt DiBenedetto, who once again would have won all your bets had you put him on your lineups, because Matt DiBenedetto with another solid run with that Levine family group racing team, which is a Gibbs-affiliated, Gibbs-engineered team. So Gibbs right now, it's Gibbs, then it's kind of Penske, and then it's everybody else.
And honestly, I'm not so sure right now we're not seeing the two Ganassi cars maybe the next best running group of cars, because first off, Kyle Larson was second, and we're starting to see some life in Kyle Larson. Kurt Busch had one of the best cars at Darlington. He had a bad pit stop, got caught back in the pack, and in fact, Kurt Busch and Denny Hamlin both had great cars, and they were victims of a crash between lap cars that also had a major effect on Jimmy Johnson and may very well knock him out of the playoffs.
Yeah, and Jimmy right now, the playoff hunt. How about though the point system we have? Let's give a kudo real quick. We have 16 people that make the playoffs, and the 16th place is tied.
Daniel Suarez and Ryan Newman, you don't think they'll be keeping an eye on each other this weekend at Indianapolis? And Clint Boyer's only about 8 points, I think, to the good, so he's pretty close too. So it's going to and Jimmy Johnson, I mean, he's not out of it, but he's going to either have to win the race or he's going to have to get a lot of stage points and really, really hope for some poor performances out of two of those other three drivers.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is he's got two guys that are tied in front of him, so he has to get both of them to have the problem, and that's where it becomes difficult. And as far as my money goes, we've talked about, if there's a week to throw a Hail Mary, well, Indianapolis, the reason why I think Indianapolis, Jeff, and I think you'd agree, the reason why this is a great last race before the playoffs, so many things can happen because of strategy, fuel mileages, and the ability to pit and not lose a lap, and some of the ways you run this race. Look at some of the winners we've had. Look at the way it's played out. You look at that, and we're looking at the standings right now on VSiN right now. I mean, Daniel Suarez is 16th. Ryan Newman is 17th with 617 points. They're tied for the final place in points, and Clint Boyer is only 8 points ahead.
Right, and right now Daniel Suarez holds the tiebreaker over Ryan Newman, but that could certainly change this week depending on who finishes where.
And
in
Kyle
the race.
Busch has locked up the...
And Kyle Busch has clinched the regular season championship, so the bonus points that go with that going into the playoffs, those are going to be big. I hate to say it. I mean, I think Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski both, I mean, they're leaking a little bit of oil heading into the playoffs, I think.
They've definitely faded. But look at the wins on that. Look at what you got there. Let's talk the stage points we talk about. Kyle Busch, 4 wins. Denny Hamlin, 4 wins. Martin Truex Jr., 4 wins. And now you have Eric Jones with his win. That's 13 wins out of 26. 50% of the wins are out of one organization right now.
There was a story I read earlier this week of, look at the Stewart-Haas team. What is the Stewart-Haas team without Kevin Harvick right now? I mean, Almirola really has not challenged for wins. Boyer has shown a little bit of life the last couple of races. He's run a little bit better the last couple of races. Suarez as well, but those guys have all just been, on a good day running between 5th and 10th, but it had a lot of average days in the teens. What's up with that organization right now?
Where'd they go? I mean, look, if we're talking this last year, Kevin Harvick, the big three. Kevin Harvick was one of those locked guys. Right now he's sitting with 2 wins, and 2 wins that were honestly almost mediocre wins. I mean, wasn't the best car, but still got the best move. Michigan comes to mind immediately. Rodney Childers, great job. But, 2 wins, only 4 stage wins. That is a whole lot less playoff points going into the playoffs here that Kevin Harvick had last year. Last year, I think he had 45 or 50 points going into the playoffs. Right now, he's sitting with 5, 10, 9, 14 points.
And I think probably a lot of people who, if you're a diehard in the sport, you really kind of understand how this is going. But if you're not, if you're just a casual fan, you probably don't understand how weighted these things are going to be. Once this race is over at Indianapolis and NASCAR resets the points and we're able to talk about the points going into Las Vegas the next week, I think that's going to be very eye-opening for a lot of race fans when it comes, and a lot of the bettors who have been betting futures on who's going to win the championship, because then they're going to realize, it's not going to be that easy for Kurt Busch or for Eric Jones. Yes, they got a few stage points, but when you realize how many points they're going to be behind
right
Kyle and Denny and Martin Truex Jr., you're going to whoa, because that's a lot of points.
And we've discussed this with some of our experts, though. There's some value on those futures still because, a guy that doesn't – that's why, you look at a guy right now on the future line. Let's just take Daniel Suarez. Daniel Suarez is 80-1. To win the championship. There's because he's barely holding on. So you need to get those future bets in for the championship. The earlier, the better. if you're looking for the guys with the large numbers. Because right now, Denny Hamlin, his numbers are only going to get smaller, and they have been all season shrinking down. He's down to 11-2. So, I mean, he is slowly becoming a favorite. Eric Jones, there's still some value at 15-1 with Eric Jones. But I think his numbers are also going to decrease with how strong the Gibbs cars are.
Well, I think this is the way you're going to have to look at it, especially if you're from a bettor and you're going to try to do a futures bet. You really have to look at the thing and say, okay, who's going to be the top 8 when we have 4 races to go? Because a lot of those guys who are lower in points, whether it is Kurt Busch or whether it is Eric Jones, some of those guys, they still have a really good chance to get into that final 8. Then they just have to win one of those last 3 races. They go to Homestead no matter how many points they have.
That's what you have to look at when you're looking at the future side. Kevin Harvick has gone up. He started the season 6-1. He's up to 7-1. That actually is a great value for a guy that one of those races is Phoenix you're talking about that kind of always locks him in.
Right, and if you're Kevin Harvick, isn't that what you're really saying? I got to be in the top 8 when we get to those last 3 races because I'm going to go out and win Phoenix.
You have to get there. You know that he's going to be the favorite.
Right, it's got to be his mentality that we're going to win Phoenix, and then we get to Homestead, everybody's even, anything can happen. And look, if you've got those 3 Gibbs cars, the 3 really top Gibbs cars, and maybe Eric Jones is in there with them. I mean, the way he's running right now. But I think those 3 Gibbs cars certainly would be the odds-on favorites to go to Homestead.
Well, and how many weeks in a row did Eric Jones finish in the top 3? And one on him, I think 3-4 weeks in a row on this show, she kept picking him top 3. So it's not like he wasn't running strong. He was running top 3s. He just wasn't winning.
It'd be nice if we actually went and did some research, but I wonder if you took over the last 3 months of the season and you ranked the Gibbs cars by points, if Denny and Eric are not 1-2 ahead of Kyle and Martin Truex Jr.
That'd be an interesting one to run. I would be willing to bet that Eric Jones may have more points than Kyle Busch.
Over the last
3
5
months. Races. Let's say 5-6 races.
I mean, I think he may have had a couple of really bad finishes. Although Kyle, I mean, he had some rough runs in there too. Kyle has just managed to, when he's had trouble, he's managed to still have a decent finish. I mean, even at Bristol. Yep. I mean, they were out to lunch at Bristol when it started, and I don't know what their deal was this past weekend at Darlington before the race actually started. Because if you remember, the qualifying was horrible. He was 34th in qualifying. There was something wrong with the motor. He even had a funny interview. He says, I know there's something wrong with the motor because I'm not that slow. Well, and he was right. So I guess NASCAR went and looked at it and allowed them to change basically everything under the hood on the car. They changed that out. So it makes you wonder, what's going on with that team that they would actually get to the racetrack, with a piece of equipment.
But they're still strong. That's the thing, is that team is still strong. And looking at the future numbers again, like you said, you've nailed that right. If you're going to make a future right now for the championship, you got to realize who those final 8 guys are going to be. You got to take a shot at those 8 guys. Who can do it? And all those guys at the bottom of those points, the Clint Boyers, the Daniel Suarez's, they're all about equal when it comes to bonus points. So they already are sitting kind of in an even Steven realm. And who can get to that final 8 is the question. And right now, the ones I'm looking at would be a Kurt Busch, 25-1 to win the championship. Would be an Eric Jones, 15-1 to win the championship. Even a Ryan Blaney with a 30-1 shot, or a Kyle Larson at 15. Those are guys that you can get one of those at this number locked in now before that drops when they make the final 8. You've got a great value.
Yeah, and I kind of look at it right now, and I believe, barring somebody pulling an upset somewhere in these first 3 races, or even at the Roval or Talladega, I believe we've got 10 legitimate guys for those 8 spots. I think the 4 Gibbs guys, without question. I think Logano, Keselowski, no question about those guys. I think Kevin Harvick and the 2 Ganassi cars. I think those guys, and Chase Elliott would be the 10th one I would put in there because we know he's going to run well at Dover. He always seems, that just seems to be a track that he runs well. And Chase Elliott last year really kind of came on during the playoffs, and he's been consistent over the summer.
And he's 12-1 still.
So I think that between those 10 guys, I think you'll get your final 8 drivers that will come out of that group. It'll just be really curious to see. 'Cause, look, we know that for the most part, Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch have got so many bonus points now, they're going to be in the final 8 pretty much no matter what. And maybe Truex, too, with all his wins. He's got 4 wins.
Jimmy Johnson's up to 80-1.
Jimmy's not making the playoffs, I don't think. Before we go to break, though, let's talk about that. Who do you think are the odd ones out, or who are going to be the guys going?
I'll tell you what, right now with the way Indianapolis plays out, I still struggle to say that Jimmy is going to be out of a playoff. It's just you keep expecting Jimmy Johnson to show up as Jimmy Johnson. Like, hey, here comes Superman. But right now with the tie of Suarez and Newman, if you look, you got to put the what we talk about, that X factor of Newman, how he just does so well at the end of races where you don't talk about him. There he is in 12th place, 8th place, 10th place. Last week, him and Daniel Suarez got into a little Hasselhoff on the racetrack, spun him out.
And they're still not agreeing on whether Daniel touched him or not.
It was impressive. Anything can happen. When you're talking about millions of dollars on the line, these guys are racing for their lives. So as far as betting goes, if I'm a bettor right now, I'll look at a future bet, but I am not going to touch Ryan Newman or Daniel Suarez or Clint Boyer for any money this weekend.Ose three are a no action line for me. Don't even think about them. Don't discuss them. Jimmy Johnson is worth a win bet because he is going to take whatever strategy he can make. He's going to throw everything out there to win the race.
I think that has to be his mentality. It has to be win. So we think Boyer gets in?
Honestly, I think Boyer is in, and I think it's going to be between Newman and Suarez. If Suarez has the car, we'll be okay. If not, Newman's going to just outsmart.
Well, it is in Newman. It is Newman's hometown track.
He's won there.
The track means a lot to him. He grew up in South Bend. He spent a lot of time going around that track. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. When we come back on Gaughan Racing, we'll be talking a little bit more about breaking down the Brickyard.
This is Gaughan Racing, the weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more. You can listen to VSiN on SiriusXM Channel 204. Watch us online at vsin.com and follow us on Twitter at VSiN Live.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game, 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake.
So is that shaded a little bit shorter considering there's a lot of smart minds behind the Cornhuskers this year?
Well, let me give all the credit for all this college football stuff to Ed Salmons, our senior college football guy here at the Superbook. And I know Ed and I both really like Nebraska this season. Talk about a team that, as bad as they started, they closed out so well at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. And that's such a mark of a great coach. And Scott Frost did such a great job with Central Florida, and he really had that team turned around by the end of last season. I don't see any reason why Nebraska won't win the Big Ten. I think it's called the Big Ten West.
You got Zeke. You can't get into a 7-man box down there because they'll run it down your throat. So obviously, it's got to come off the passing game or some other way. Do they have an answer for it down there?
Yeah, Michael, they really, they really struggled, as you mentioned, with that. Some great numbers that you just threw out there, and you're absolutely right. They missed a really a point of attack blocker. They're tight end. They used to have a combination. Even old man Jason Witten, and then James Hanna. When they had James Hanna, and then James Hanna retired. James Hanna was kind of a stunt man. He's like, okay, they take the actor out, they put the stunt man in, and he does all the dirty work. And they missed a guy like that. They didn't have that ability to really control the point of attack.
I mean, what was your low? How bummed were you at that moment? Were you just super dejected, or were you okay with it?
It's a funny story. So when right after the taping finished, and I kind of had to go sign my forms to collect my second place money, one of the producers came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she actually started crying because she said she had never seen anyone play the game so beautifully before, and I had to kind of pat her on the back and comfort her.
That's amazing.
The experience was ending.
Wow.
But I would say it was kind of a bittersweet moment. Obviously, I wasn't happy to lose, but at the same time, it was getting a little stressful going back there every week, and I was kind of like I had put this achievement, checked it off the bucket list.
Defensively, this is a good football team. And Fangio will make them. They'll create some turnovers with his pressure and his way to, you got Von Miller on one side and Bradley Chubb on the other. That's going to be, and then you're playing an altitude up there. Look, they're 6-10 last year, and you and I watched it repeatedly at the Oceans, right? How many games did Vance Joseph mess up for him?
Yep, I would say off the top of my head 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we sat there and like, what are you doing? And I think if they just don't lose games, Belichick talks about this all the time. We have to avoid losing before we can win. And I thought last year Denver lost games more than any.
Welcome back to our weekly NASCAR show, live from the Sportsbook at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Now, back to Gaughan Racing.
Welcome back in on Gaughan Racing. I'm Jeff Motley alongside Brendan Gaughan. And Brendan, we're heading into the final regular season race of the season, the Brickyard, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So we're going to start breaking down some of the numbers for the race this weekend. And I don't think there's any big surprise. We see Kyle Busch right there on the point as the favorite to win the race, a plus 300. But we got a number of guys who have had good runs at Indianapolis in the past who have got pretty good odds this week. I mean, we have Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick are both coming in at plus 600. And a guy I really, really like this week, Martin Truex Jr., plus 800. And I'll tell you why I really like Martin. He has run well there so many times, and he hasn't found victory lane. 2 years ago, he and Kyle Busch were the class of the field. They were running side by side and took each other out in turn one. Last year, he probably had the best car in the race. He had a brake failure and ended up having a very poor finish. So there's a guy that's got a little bit of long odds. And right there with him is his teammate and last week's winner at Darlington, Eric Jones. So when you look at those numbers right there for winning the race. I know we hate picking race winners.
Here's what I like. You have Joe Gibbs Racing plus 300, Joe Gibbs Racing plus 600, Joe Gibbs Racing plus 800, Joe Gibbs Racing plus 800, with Kevin Harvick plus 600. The 4 of the 5 favorites are all Joe Gibbs Racing, right off the top. I mean, period. Just
kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the first segment of the show. It's their game, and everybody else is allowed to play.
The Penske's, who are the hottest organization to start the season, you got Brad Keselowski at 10-1 and Joey Logano at 10-1. I mean, how far have those gone?
Well, Brad's a defending champion of the race. He won there last year. Brad's always been solid there. And, we talk about how similar this track is to Pocono, that that's probably the best comparison you can make. And there's no question that we have seen Penske cars always run well at Pocono. We saw Brad Keselowski win at Indianapolis last year. Those are pretty good odds on those Penske cars. And then right behind that, you've got Kyle Larson sitting there at 12-1. And Kyle Larson has been a hot driver lately. I know he hasn't won. It may be like Eric Jones last week. Kyle Larson is finally due to break through.
What I like is that Kyle Larson's raced there 5 times and has 3 top 10s, 7th, 9th, and 5th in 3 of his races there. And he is running well. Will he get a win to end the season? That's what you don't know. But sitting there at 12-1, that's a nice number for a guy to win the race. Like you said, we don't normally talk about winning the race. Blaney and Kurt Busch at 20-1 with Ryan Blaney. I mean, Kurt's been spectacular. Very very consistently hot most of the season.
And I think probably maybe over the last couple of weeks, maybe some guys like Kyle Larson, like Ryan Blaney, those guys probably were defending their position a little bit because even though they were fairly safe, they hadn't clinched that playoff spot. Now they're clinched no matter what happens. So
now they can go for it.
Right, it's all about winning the race and winning stages right now. There is no point.
Speaking of winning the race, I just told you, there's 3 that are no action lines to me. Clint Boyer, Daniel Suarez, Clint's at 40-1, Daniel Suarez at 40-1, and Ryan Newman's at 100-1. Those 3 drivers right there to me are I'm staying away from. I don't care about Newman at 100-1 because all they're doing is racing each other. They're not racing any other strategy except what is the other doing. But Jimmy Johnson at 60-1, the only thing Jimmy can do, and a Paul Menard at 100-1.
Your boy, Matty D is 100-1.
Those are 3 drivers that all they have is one thing left to win this race.
DiBenedetto has a top 10 already at Indianapolis.
Yes,
the guy before he even got into this really good car that he's in, or pretty good car that he's in right now.
And I think Matt DiBenedetto, as long as he is now a favorite in a group, that foreshadowing. But Matt DiBenedetto is going to win his group. But at 100-1, it's a great return, but that's a long shot as far as. But Jimmy Johnson's not as long of a shot 60-1. They're going to try to pull out whatever strategy they can.
It's a Hail Mary.
It's a Hail Mary, but it's a driver and a team that knows how to do it. They've got Doug Flutie at quarterback. They can do it, but it's a great return at 60-1.
All right, let's move over to our top three now. Our DraftKings top three.
And
I know.
Look who's negative.
Kyle Busch back on the negative line here at a minus 134. And I wonder where you come up with that number, 134. Like, why not minus 125 or minus 130? Why is it 134? It's a penny line for sure.
It's not the South Point. No penny line South Point.
But we look down through there, and you talked about guys that you like to stay away from. But now when you get into the top three business, maybe there is a place where you see a Daniel Suarez could finish top three. He's got pretty long odds there, plus 850. I really think this week some of the top three odds are really kind of tough to bet.
They're pretty tight.
They're pretty tight. I kind of see maybe a Kurt Busch there at plus 450 or a Chase Elliott at plus 500. I mean, at least there's a little bit of value to be made right there. But a lot of those guys, I mean, you've got a guy in the minus category in Kyle Busch, and then you got four guys that are in the plus 100s.
Well, you got Denny Hamlin 125, Kevin Harvick 135, Eric Jones plus 175 with Truex at the same one, and then Brad Keselowski at 200. So I mean, pretty tight up there for those guys. Kyle Larson plus 275, Joey Logano plus 275. That's at least you're getting a little bit extra of your money back. Blaney 450, Kurt Busch. There's your Kurt Busch at plus 450.
No, it's Kurt Busch plus 450 and Chase Elliott plus 500. I think that's a little bit of value there, and you never know at Indianapolis where you talked earlier. Fuel mileage can play into it. It does sound like they have a good weather forecast this weekend, so I don't think we're going to have to worry about any weather shortened races. But you got a guy like Paul Menard sitting down there 17-1 on the top three, and he's a former winner at Indianapolis. He got his only career win there at Indianapolis.
And Menard, they're a group that he actually runs well there. Not just his win, but Paul has always actually run pretty, 10th, 16th, 14th, 12th, 14th. Has a great average finish at the Brickyard. So I mean, not a top three, but that is something that he knows that he has to throw caution to the wind there, and it's a decent number to try to get that top three.
All right, well, let's move away from top three. Let's talk a little bit of driver matchups. This week we don't see all of the evens, and I mean we see a few of them, but I mean right here on the first board, it jumps right out at me. I mean, Denny Hamlin over the last 4 months has been so much better than Kyle Busch. And it's not like a plus 105. No. It's a plus 135. That is a very, very big number for Denny Hamlin right there against Kyle Busch. That one just, to me, it just jumps off the page.
Denny Hamlin, last 5 races, 3rd, 5th, 4th, 17th, and 3rd. So hold on a second.
This is at Indianapolis?
Yeah, at Indianapolis. So, I mean...
And I'm sure that 17th was probably an anomaly. Knowing Denny Hamlin, they got a pit road penalty or something.
And Kyle Busch is 2nd, 1st, 34th, and 8th. So, I mean... And Kyle is so good in that race. You talked about the 134th place.
Yeah,
but still...
That was a crash.
But still, a plus 135 on a Denny Hamlin right there, that's a huge plus line for Denny Hamlin.
Yeah, that kind of blows me away a little bit there, especially to see him such a favorite over Martin Truex Jr. there on a plus 104 line.
And Eric Jones, plus 105 to minus 125 to Kevin Harvick.
Another guy. I mean, that's more a reputation line, I believe, far more of a reputation line than it is necessarily, and they're looking at what they've done past history, not what. It's what the old, what have you done for me lately? Well, what have you done for me lately is Eric Jones has been better than Kevin Harvick.
How about on our screen, the bottom one right there, Kevin Harvick plus minus 125, Martin Truex Jr. plus 105. Martin Truex Jr. has been a lot hotter than Kevin.
And he's run well at Indianapolis. And did you ever think that you would see up there a Brad Keselowski a plus over Eric Jones? Now, I believe that line is correct, but it's just, it kind of shows a little bit of a changing of the guard for a few guys.
Oh,
seeing a new guy come along there.
That's impressive right there. I mean, Brad, a plus line. And look, Brad Keselowski's good here, but they're running momentum on that one.
Now we switch over to our page 2 of our driver head-to-head matchups. And here we got 2 teammates that are head-to-head, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski. Joey's drawing a plus line. I'm going to say that's probably because Brad's the defending champion of the race.
Has to be. I mean, because Brad, look, he's the most recent winner. You got to do it. And I don't disagree with it, so to speak. But how about going down? There's some fun ones here. Ryan Newman plus 120 to Daniel Suarez minus 140.
That tells you who the odds makers think is going to get into the playoffs.
You know, right there, you're saying that Suarez is the better is the better team, and they're going to outduel, and they are the better team. Honestly, if you look at the Stewart-Haas versus Roush, but Newman, I don't think that's given a lot of love to Newman and what he does in these races, that X factor he brings. I think that's a great line for Ryan Newman.
Well, and I think the other thing that people have to remember is theoretically, Suarez, you could win this bet on Suarez, and he could still not make the playoffs.
Yes.
Because if Ryan Newman comes out and pulls up a bunch of stage points, and I think we know, and you talked about it earlier, the way that you can pit at Indianapolis without losing a lap under green, there are going to be guys who are going to come into pit with 3 or 4 to go on the stage because they're trying to win the race.
Yeah.
If you're Ryan Newman, if you're Daniel Suarez, if I see those leader pit,
every point.
Absolutely.
Every point you can get.
I am not. I know a lot of times crew chiefs want to race the race backwards. Not this race. If you're Daniel Suarez or Ryan Newman, Clint Boyer.
Like I said, those 3 guys are racing each other only. But that's where Jimmy Johnson becomes an X factor. Is Jimmy is going to go and do whatever it takes to win, not just get stage.
Well, and I think you're racing stage to stage. You know, I want to win stage 1. I want to win stage 2. I'll worry about the final stage when I get to the final stage and hope that a break falls my way. Now, one other one I want to kind of bring up in here that really kind of surprises me. Alex Bowman plus 120 against his teammate William Byron.
I don't know how you get such a big disparity. Let me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, you can't. There's not a lot of data points because neither one of them have run very many races.
One data point for.
I mean, I don't know. I don't understand that one. That one kind of comes as a surprise to me. But
William's the favorite, huh?
Yeah. So
one race, a 19th place finish.
Well, but it's nice to see we've got. For a change, we have some driver head-to-head matchups that have some value. There's some interest, and there's actually some betting numbers up there that you might be willing to actually take a shot on. But we got to go to break, and when we come back, we get into our group matchups. You and I love the group matchups, so we'll be right back on Gaughan Racing, talking the groups.
This is Gaughan Racing, the weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more. You can listen to VSiN on SiriusXM Channel 204. Watch us online at vsin.com and follow us on Twitter at VSiNLive.
Catch VSiN last week. Here's some of what you missed.
I mean, what was your low? How bummed were you at that moment? Were you just super dejected, or were you okay with it?
It's a funny story. So when right after the taping finished, and I kind of had to go sign my forms to collect my second place money, one of the producers came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she actually started crying because she said she had never seen anyone play the game so beautifully before, and I had to kind of pat her on the back and comfort her.
That's amazing.
The experience was ending.
Wow.
But I would say it was kind of a bittersweet moment. Obviously, I wasn't happy to lose, but at the same time, it was getting a little stressful going back there every week, and I was kind of like I had put this achievement, checked it off the bucket list.
Your thoughts on this hire, because there's a lot of folks who certainly we respect on our side of the counter with a pretty strong opinion on the Mountaineers this year.
I like the hire. I don't like what's going to happen this season. I almost get the feeling that Holgerson saw rough waters ahead and left for Houston because of that. They got very few starters back. Several guys transferred out. I think this is going to be a tough season in Morgantown. I actually be surprised if they win 4 or 5 games even.
If you're a 49er fan, the Richard Sherman interception as you're getting ready to score that puts Seattle in the Super Bowl, right? That play call was not supposed to be called from that hash mark. They wanted to run that play from the right hash. They ran it from the left. Big mistake. When they sent the play in, the coaches in the box screamed, wrong hash. Everybody said, okay. They worked all week long on running that double move, Crabtree against Brian Maxwell, not against Richard Sherman. Wow. So the margin of going to the Super Bowl came down to a hash mark being the ball on the wrong side and the play getting run in. And that's the difference, that thin line between what's successful and what isn't.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you said a segment ago in terms of Robert Griffin III, he sits there and he sees how the Patriots are working, but they don't want to do the work. Everybody in life always says, hey, they want to be successful.
Nobody wants to do the work.
That's exactly right. Are you willing to do
those
what it
details?
takes?
It's like the secret. Marcus Aurelius is quoted as saying, the secret to all victory lies in the organization of the non-obvious. The non-obvious is what determines games.
You are watching VSiN, the Vegas Stats and Information Network. We're changing the way you watch sports because cashing tickets is what it's all about.
Welcome back to our weekly NASCAR show, live from the Sportsbook at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Now, back to Gaughan Racing.
Well, we're back. Jeff Motley, Brendan Gaughan, talking a little Brickyard 400, or what is it, the Big Machine Vodka 400. That's
Machine Vodka
at the Brickyard. That's a mouthful. But we've been talking a little bit about who we thought was going to win the race, who's going to finish in the top three, some head-to-head matchups. You and I always love the groups, so we're going to jump right into talking a little bit of group matchups right now.
And I think most of the fans love the groups.
I think the fans love the groups too. I mean, because really you're only asking a driver to beat three other drivers, not beat the whole field. The head-to-head, the problem with head-to-head is you just don't get as big of odds.
You don't get the return.
So you're never going to get the return. And the groups are something we really enjoy. So we're going to take a look at Group A first. Kyle Busch, an overwhelming favorite. His teammate, Martin Truex Jr., an overwhelming underdog at plus 330.
Yeah, I mean, plus 165 for Kyle is a large favorite. Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick both at 300s, and Martin Truex at plus 330. That's the biggest Group A disparity we've seen all season. Kyle back in Group A. They swapped it back around. But that is a large disparity, especially when, like you talked, Denny Hamlin has been the hottest driver in the sport, and he's plus 300. So, and all this swapping around they've done with Kyle Busch in and out, they've never moved Kevin Harvick out.
Yeah, I don't understand that. And I'm really, I tell you, Kevin Harvick's definitely the one I would not be betting out of that group. I mean, I think you could probably make a case for the other three guys. Obviously, you can make a case for Kyle Busch, but I think you can make a huge case for Denny Hamlin or for Martin Truex Jr. But I'm not really sure what the case is you can make for Kevin Harvick right now at plus 300 in Group A. I think Truex is a pretty interesting bet there, though, because that's a pretty big number at 330.
I like Truex, and I like Denny at that 300 number. I do like those two. Like you said, it's a good return. Both those kind of hit a heartstring on me.
Now, let's look at Group B. How about Group B? Now, Eric Jones is the favorite now in Group B at plus 200. Yes, he has been running well, and yes, he won at Darlington. He had a good run at Pocono. I think he finished second in the last race at Pocono, and we keep talking about how we compare Indy to Pocono. And I'm not saying he shouldn't be the favorite. It just kind of surprises me a little bit because I think if they're trying to look for people to put some juice down and to make a bet, you're probably not going to bet Eric Jones at plus 200 against that group.
Oh, and Group B is Eric Jones at 200, Brad Keselowski plus 250, Joey Logano plus 290, and Kyle Larson plus 325. Wow. I mean, Eric Jones went from Group C a couple weeks ago to the favorite in Group B. He's definitely getting some love. And above Brad Keselowski and Joey Logano, two of the hottest drivers in the sport earlier this season. And Larson also has been hot in his own right. So I think it's hard to bet Eric Jones anymore. All that value that Ann was finding on him earlier in the season is kind of dissipating quickly.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And I kind of like to look for the underdogs a little bit, and to see Kyle Larson, knowing how consistent he's been lately, how well he's run, and Eric Jones and Kyle Larson went 1-2 last week at Darlington. And I think seeing the number disparity to be that large between Eric Jones and Kyle Larson is a little bit shocking to me. And I think you actually could find some real value there on Kyle Larson.
I'm not going to say I'm circling, but
you might be. Okay, we have your picks coming up in the next segment, so we'll see. All right, let's move on to Group C. Pretty even here. Ryan Blaney, Kurt Busch, and Chase Elliott all the same at 255, and then Clint Boyer, the guy who's desperately hanging on to 15th in the playoff standings right now at plus 280. I mean, that's kind of flipping a coin on that group, don't you think?
Yeah, but I mean, if you're looking at whom I think the favorite would be, you got to put Kurt Busch as your first odds-on favorite. Maybe Chase Elliott as a second one in that one. Which is why they're all tied up there. Clint Boyer, once again, anything that has Clint Boyer, I'm taking him out just because there's too much that's going to happen for me to put my money anywhere near Clint or a Newman or a Suarez.
I think it would have been really interesting if we had a group that just had Boyer, Suarez, Newman, and Johnson.
You know what?
I think that would have been a
we
really.
should have called the Westgate and tried to get that, because the Westgate's where we get our groups from. That would have been a hell of a group, a clinch group, and have those 4 drivers. That would have been fun.
Yeah. Now we also see Group D. Group D again is pretty packed. It's pretty close, and kind of. I know what you're talking about, not necessarily wanting to go with those playoff drivers. And in this one, we got William Byron and Suarez both at 240, then Almirola, Jimmy Johnson at plus 285. But now you're getting into a group where if you're Jimmy Johnson or you're Daniel Suarez, that's a group you really want to win. Number one, you're going head-to-head against one of the guys you're going to. Granted, Jimmy is certainly on the outside looking in. But if you're Daniel Suarez, if you're going to have a good day, you feel like those are 3 guys you have to beat.
Yes, and for me, I look at that, like I said earlier, Jimmy is worth a flyer on a race win. Jimmy is also worth a nod on the plus 285, because you know that they're going to do everything they can to be up there on strategy. Forget about if they have the speed or not. They're going to try to strategy it no matter what. So I think that a 285 in Group D is a really good number for Jimmy Johnson on the flyer. And Almirola has been very bland. Byron's been up and down and hit and miss. And then you got Suarez, who's just trying to play it safe, so to speak, and watch the other guys. So to me, 285 on Jimmy right there is a decent return for your risk.
And one thing I think we need to tell anybody that is going to put any bets down, don't get too terribly excited at Indianapolis while you're watching the race. Get excited when it gets late in the race, because it could be very simple.
Lap 30 when your guy's in the lead.
Or he wins stage 1.
Yeah,
if he wins stage 1.
A whole lot of racing.
Exactly. And you have to always kind of remember, and we've talked about this earlier on the show, that the objective for a lot of guys is not going to be to win stage 1 or stage 2. So just because your guy might look like he is winning stage 1 and stage 2, do not be going to stand in line waiting to cash the check in or cash that ticket in, because it's going to be an interesting race from that standpoint.
Fantasy players don't get really excited when they're in the lead early. Hold your garage pick.
All right, we're going to move along to our last couple of groups. We've got Matt DiBenedetto, Paul Menard, and Chris Buescher, all 3 at plus 255. Austin Dillon at plus 280. I honestly, as a person who really likes Matt DiBenedetto and really loves what he's doing, I'm insulted that he is in Group E and that he is not an overwhelming favorite in Group E, because I'm telling you, he's better than a Group E driver right now.
I was going to say, I almost would put him up in a Group C if you really want the truth. I mean, you look at the guys up there, he's been running with them. But tell you what, it's a gift for me. Other than Paul Menard, who's going to go for that win a la Jimmy Johnson style, Buescher's been fantastic this year also, and they had another great finish at Darlington. So, I mean, they've been doing great, but Matt DiBenedetto has been doing even better. And so this is a place he's done well at, even on the teams that were less capable. And a plus 255, it's not a lot. It's not a 300 return, but you know what? I think that's easy money right there.
And it's really almost, if you go and look at the point standings, those 4 guys are pretty much all right there together in the points. But again, it kind of gets back to when we talk about who is doing what lately. DiBenedetto has certainly been the hottest driver of those.
And
Buescher is next along those lines. Austin Dillon has had some moments. Paul Menard really has not shown a whole lot over the last few months of the season. I mean, maybe he's there partially because he is a former winner there. He won his first career race or only career race at Indianapolis. And in Group F, our final group, we like to call it the Ron Flatter group. It's no longer the Chris Buescher Ron Flatter group. It's F for Flatter. I mean, I hope Flatter listens to our show and knows that we pay homage to him every week
episode,
because it's Group F. It's a good thing his name starts with F, or we wouldn't have named it after him. But we got Michael McDowell as the favorite there at a plus 250, followed by Bubba Wallace at a plus 255. A guy who let you down a little bit last week, David Reagan at plus 270, along with Ty Dillon plus 270. Bubba's been running a little bit better lately.
He has been running a little bit better.
I'm not sure why, but he has.
And that's what I'm just checking up some stats right here. I want to see.
Well, you're probably going to have a lot more data points on David Reagan and maybe Michael McDowell at Indianapolis.
I'm just trying to see how well has Ty Dillon in his 2 years been running there versus Bubba's only got 1 data point. So, I mean, it's tough to look at Bubba's, but I don't know. Darrell's been running better. Reagan is still Reagan should have been the guy that had that deal for me last weekend, and they just could not get the wheels to roll straight on that thing. I don't know. That's a tough one this week. Group F, normally there's somebody that sticks out to me that says, hey, this is the guy in Group F. Today, I don't see that.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Part of me thinks that Michael McDowell is probably the stronger driver out of that group. And I guess that's probably why he's the favorite. But I probably would stay away from that group. I just don't think there's much in that group that really kind of just comes flying out.
And normally
at you right
there's
now.
one that I look like last week at David. I picked David Reagan with gusto last week, saying he had that. And I'm surprised it didn't work out the way I thought.
Well, I find it very interesting that when we look at these groups overall, we actually find the best value and the biggest numbers this week are on the top groups, the Group A and Group B.
Yeah.
Because I think what we found in a lot of weeks is if there was a place to try to steal some money, it was in groups D, E, and F, because maybe you could find something there. But this week, it's Group A and Group B. So it'll be exciting to see how that turns out. When we come back on Gone Racing, we'll talk about our picks from last week. We will make our picks for this week. We'll also talk about who's going to be in and who's not going to be in the playoffs.
This is Gone Racing, the weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more. You can listen to VSiN on SiriusXM Channel 204. Watch us online at vsin.com and follow us on Twitter at VSiN Live.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game, 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not, or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake.
So is that shaded a little bit shorter considering there's a lot of smart minds behind the Cornhuskers this year?
Well, let me give all the credit for all this college football stuff to Ed Salmons, our senior college football guy here at the Superbook. And I know Ed and I both really like Nebraska this season. Talk about a team that, as bad as they started, they closed out so well at the end of last year. Mm-hmm. And that's such a mark of a great coach. And Scott Frost did such a great job with Central Florida, and he really had that team turned around by the end of last season. I don't see any reason why Nebraska won't win the Big Ten. I think it's called the Big Ten West.
You got Zeke. You can't get into a 7-man box down there because they'll run it down your throat. So obviously, it's got to come off the passing game or some other way. Do they have an answer for it down there?
Yeah, Michael, they really, they really struggled, as you mentioned, with that. Some great numbers that you just threw out there, and you're absolutely right. They missed a really a point of attack blocker. They're tight end. They used to have a combination, even old man Jason Witten, and then James Hanna. When they had James Hanna, and then James Hanna retired. James Hanna was kind of a stunt man. He's like, okay, they take the actor out, they put the stunt man in, and he does all the dirty work. And they missed a guy like that. They didn't have that ability to really control the point of attack.
I mean, what was your low? How bummed were you at that moment? Were you just super dejected, or were you okay with it?
It's a funny story. So when right after the taping finished, and I kind of had to go sign my forms to collect my second place money, one of the producers came up to me and she gave me a hug, and she actually started crying because she said she had never seen anyone play the game so beautifully before, and I had to kind of pat her on the back and comfort her.
That's amazing.
The experience was ending.
Wow.
But I would say it was kind of a bittersweet moment. Obviously, I wasn't happy to lose, but at the same time, it was getting a little stressful going back there every week, and I was kind of like I had put this achievement, checked it off the bucket list.
Defensively, this is a good football team, and Fangio will make them. They'll create some turnovers with his pressure and his way to. You got Von Miller on one side and Bradley Chubb on the other. That's going to be, and then you're playing an altitude up there. Look, they're 6-10 last year, and you and I watched it repeatedly at the Oceans, right? How many games did Vance Joseph mess up for him?
Yep, I would say off the top of my head 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we sat there and like, what are you doing? And I think if they just don't lose games, Belichick talks about this all the time. We have to avoid losing before we can win. And I thought last year Denver lost games more than any.
Welcome back to our weekly NASCAR show, live from the Sportsbook at the South Point Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. Now, back to Gone Racing.
Welcome back into our final segment, the one we call Banking It. I'm Jeff Motley alongside Brendan Gaughan, and this is where we make our picks. We talk about our picks. But before we get into our picks, those of you who are watching us on VSiN, who are watching us on the various streaming,
we have a special gift.
Streaming opportunities. We have a video we want to show you because we're in Las Vegas. So we want to talk about our Las Vegas driver. Brendan and I both played a little baseball when we were younger. So Kurt Busch had an opportunity throughout the first pitch at the Cleveland Indians game last night. So Brendan and I are going to break down Kurt's first pitch at the Indians game last night. So we have that video. Now look at it. Now watch this.
He's from the stripe.
Now look. Okay, he's giving his weight. That's all good. Now watch this windup. Now he's looking in for. He looks like Craig Kimbrell now. You know, he's down there to get the sign. But now he's got in the windup, just a bit outside, as Bob Uecker would say. You realize if that was a left-handed batter, we'd had a bench clearing brawl.
No, it would have been
that was like right at the
him so far that it wouldn't have hit him.
And we're going to give Kurt grief about that when we see him next week.
I absolutely will, because he gave like he had the whole windup down, and then he threw kind of. But I will give him this: he threw from the mound.
He did.
Which many of those guys we've seen go out there and throw from the front of the mound, and throw just a little lollipop. And at least he put a little effort into it. He tried.
It almost reminded me of Crash Davis telling Nuke LaLoosh, hit the bull.
Hit the bull.
Because he would have hit the bull if the catcher had not gone running outside of the left-handed batter's box.
As Bob Uecker would say, just a bit outside.
But anyway, we're having a little fun with our hometown boy, and I know Kurt would get a chuckle if he's listening wherever he'll be driving around while we're doing this show. All right, it's time to get into our picks. Our producer, Ann, has taken back over first place because someone had a very poor week, that being Mr. Gaughan.
I didn't have a very poor week. I was only minus 1.5. But
while I am in last place, I did win the week. So I want to at least pat myself on the back a little bit that I did win the week.
And you're in the plus number for the season. So
I'm actually doing
all
well.
All 3 are pluses.
I've been the consistent one. You guys have hit 2 Hail Marys. That's the problem. When you get people hitting grand slams, they can score so much quicker than a guy hitting a bunch of singles.
Hey,
and that's what I'm doing. I'm hitting a bunch of singles.
Still wins you money.
All right, we're gonna let Ann make her picks first. Fire away.
Well, this week obviously I am going to lose 2 at least. We know that off the bat because I'm going all top 3.
Nothing like 2 guaranteed losers, and you have to even make your pick.
To lose, yes. So I am going to take Kevin Harvick plus 135, Brad Keselowski plus 200, Joey Logano plus 275, Daniel Suarez plus 850, and Jimmy Johnson at 10-1, because I really do feel like he's going to make that. Even if he does make that big push at the end, let's say, I feel like he can at least get to the top 3.
All right.
I did think about taking him at 60-1 to win, but
you know what this also proves? Now, granted, Ann made her picks before we started doing the show.
Absolutely.
She made it ahead of time. You wonder why, after listening to you saying the last drivers I would pick are the ones that are in the hunt for the championship, right there at the bottom. She didn't make any changes. So she basically said, I don't care what Brendan has to say.
That's okay. That's okay. I'll accept it.
Which I can't blame her given the week you had last week. But it is your turn to pick because you are in second place, thanks to our good friend Matt DiBenedetto.
Well, last week with my 3-team parlay, I just missed it. Larson?
Can we talk about that for a minute?
Larson, I'm killing you.
Okay, well, for those who may not have heard last week, how about explaining what you did and how it ended up to be such an abject failure?
I had the hedge of the century. I had the greatest hedge of the century. I had Kyle Larson to win the race at 5-1, which at least would have put me back even. And then I had him against 3 at a 3-team parlay, all in head-to-head matchups, all of them with Kyle Larson losing, because I thought he might have a rough day with the way he runs.
Against top guys like Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr., I believe.
And it ends up that Kyle Larson finishes second. So he misses my hedge by 1 position, and he beats all the rest of the guys that I needed him to beat. So thank you, Matt DiBenedetto, once again last week, giving me a plus 250 because he was my big winner for the week. So.
He was your only winner for the week.
Thank you, Matty D. So this week, I'm going to kick off, and I'm going to ride my Matt DiBenedetto hot hand, and I am picking him in Group E to give me a plus 255 on that. I'm also going to stick in the groups for most of mine today. So I got Matty D, Group E. Then I'm going to have a Group D matchup with Jimmy Johnson, a plus 285. I really think that that's going to be a decent one for me. Ann's picking him to be top 3. I'm just picking him to win his group. And then I'm going to A and B for 2 more. I got Denny Hamlin at plus 300. It's really hard to pick a guy of that caliber at plus 300 and turn him down. So I'm picking him at plus 300. Jeff, you and I have talked about it. He's the hottest guy, we think, arguably in the sport. So he's there for me. And Kyle Larson at plus 325. He didn't win last week, but I was on the don't line, let's say, last week. So now I'm betting the pass line with Kyle. So, Kyle, you hurt me last week. Don't hurt me this week. And then my last one, I'm going into the top 3, and I'm going with Mr. Jeff Motley, the man that we just watched throw out his first pitch, and that would be Kurt Busch at plus 450. He's been running too consistent for me. I think he's going to get me a nice solid top 3 out of that one. Not quite like Ann picking all top 3s where she must win at least 2 of them to win any money. So I think I'm being a little more smart, and then I'm going to end up losing to Ann this week.
Well, you never know how that goes, but we will hope for your sake that Kurt races a little better at Indy than his pitch was in Cleveland. So, all right, I'm in last, Mr. Consistency. I did win last week, so I'm at least happy to get the win. Very happy that Eric Jones, who I had to finish in the top 3 at plus 500, was a big winner there. And also Clint Boyer won my group, so I got a big 3 points on.
Yep, there's your plus 300.
Right, exactly, on Clint Boyer. So this week, I'm going to pick a race winner. I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. I am really sold that he's going to break through at the Brickyard. I just think it's a track where he has been very, very good. He has been somewhat snake bit. I think he's going to win there. My second pick, I'm going to go into the driver head-to-head matchups. I really like how hot Denny Hamlin has been, and I think Kyle Busch has been cold. I know Kyle Busch has dominated at the Brickyard in a number of races, but I'm going to take Denny Hamlin at plus 135 over Kyle Busch in the driver head-to-head matchups. And then, sadly, you and I are going to do very similar probably because we have a couple of the same picks in the group matchups. Now, I'm not going with you in Group A. I know you went with Denny Hamlin in Group A. I'm going to continue my ride with Martin Truex Jr. in Group A. So I'm going to go Martin Truex Jr. at plus 330 Group A. But I am going to agree with you in Group B. I am all in on the Kyle Larson. I do think he's a hot driver right now. I think he's doing well. I'm going with him on the plus 325 in Group B. And you
you're
know
going
what?
to Group E.
Of course. To me, Matty D, I'm going to take Matty D until he decides that he can't win a group for us. But, the guy has won everything for bettors lately. So if you're really looking for a guy that you want to go all in on, I think it's Matt DiBenedetto. So I'm going with him at plus 255. And I'm really surprised, Ann took Matt DiBenedetto and won with him last week because she just wanted to say DiBenedetto. So
she left it off this week.
And you said it twice in like 30 seconds last week. So, Ann, why didn't you pick DiBenedetto just so you could say DiBenedetto again?
It's a good question.
So just say it, and you'll get it out of your system today.
I'm very happy that last week I won with Matt DiBenedetto.
Very nicely said. Matty D, look, right now, if you're talking about cashing tickets, Matt DiBenedetto has been by far the guy that has cashed more tickets for bettors lately probably than anybody, and good tickets too. He's been strong, especially like that win at Bristol that skyrocketed me, back to breathing in the league. That was, but he has been absolutely wonderful for bettors the last month or so.
Yeah, probably Eric Jones, probably been the 2 guys that have had the best value. Well, we're kind of fishing up our picks a little bit early this week. We don't normally just talk about things that are surrounding races, but Las Vegas is our hometown. We broadcast from Las Vegas. You have lived here your whole life. I've been here for almost 21 years. Las Vegas Motor Speedway is my employer. It's your home track. A lot going on next weekend with the playoffs kicking off here in Las Vegas.
South Point 400 race.
Correct. And some of the stuff that we want to talk about will actually be over by the time anybody is listening to our Las Vegas show. One of the things that will go on Thursday prior to the Las Vegas race happening down on the Strip, the 16 playoff drivers are going to actually do the Boulevard Burnout. It's going to be televised live on NBCSN.
Really?
NBCSN, they're going to have a set with Steve Letarte, and I'm not sure who else, maybe Chris Devoda, set up in front of the Fashion Show Mall. And the 16 playoff drivers are going to parade northbound on Las Vegas Boulevard from Planet Hollywood, and they're going to do donuts in the intersection of Spring Mountain Road and Las Vegas Boulevard, and they're going to finish up over near the convention center. So that's a great fan event. It's free for everybody to come out. And then later on that evening, and I'm going to kind of let you talk about this a little bit more, is the inaugural, might be the only, Brendan Gaughan Celebrity Bowling Classic that's going to benefit Speedway Children's Charities.
Let's just call it the Celebrity Bowling Classic.
Well, I've seen the logo, and your name is prominent on the logo.
We've done a great job. Thank you, Mr. Motley and the Speedway, and my sister-in-law Sally. I think we're up to like 20-ish drivers that we have confirmed now. Kurt Busch and Kyle Busch are going to be coming. Austin Dillon.
Matt DiBenedetto.
Matt Tiff, Tyler Reddick.
Daniel Suarez. We've got a great superstar lineup. If you go to southpoint400.com, there is where you can find all the information on how to basically you can bowl with one of these drivers. You can bid on it in an auction format. And SCCLasVegas.org also has the
SCCLasVegas.org.
And there's also a number of, or you can go to SpeedwayChildren'sCharities.com and you can click on the Las Vegas chapter. There's also going to be all kinds of other cool things
There's
on there.
There's cool stuff I've heard that we've got from. So thank you to all those that donated pieces and parts, because it does all benefit Speedway Children's Charity. But the nice thing is, what's really fun is you get to bowl with the driver, and we've invited the drivers' teams to come. So you and your 3-4 friends get to bowl with a driver, and then we're going to put the team next to them. So not only are you going to get the driver, but you're going to have – they're always more relaxed when they're around their own buddies.
Right, and we're going to have a number of the NBC broadcast crew will be bowling.
Rick
Allen, Kelly Stavis, Marty Snyder, Dave Burns, Dale Jarrett will be here. Kevin Harvick will be here. Ryan Newman will be here, even though they're not bowling. So it's going to be a –
star-studded event.
It's going to be a star-studded event, and that's going to lead in and kick off a great – weekend of racing in Las Vegas. We're going to be fortunate enough to have the first cutoff race for the Truck Series. We're going to have the last regular season race for the Xfinity Series, and then we're going to have the kickoff to the playoffs with the South Point 400. So
great weekend of racing, all at night too.
All at night. Everything is going to finish under the lights. And before we sign off, you're going to be on the radio with Pete again this weekend. You're doing your fantasy show. What time can people tune in and hear that?
Sunday. I have no clue yet. I got to look.
Okay. Well, whatever time the race starts at Indy, it'll be a little bit before that. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking the South Point 400 and racing here in Las Vegas on Gaughan Racin'.
This is Gaughan Racin', the weekly NASCAR show that gets you ready for this week's big race and more. You can listen to VSiN on SiriusXM Channel 204. Watch us online at vsin.com and follow us on Twitter at VSiNLive.
If you didn't catch VSiN last week, here's some of what you missed.
How much in the terms of momentum or legs does the 18-game, 16 per player maximum have?
I can't imagine that Tom Brady's going to miss 2 games. I just can't fathom that you have a starting quarterback and you got to rest him for 2 games. And what that would look like is everybody would rest their quarterbacks first 2 weeks of the season and then play the rest of the year. I mean, why I'm not, or maybe rest them in week 17 when the game doesn't matter if you think you can get there. But it's either early or late, but you can't rest them in October or November. There's too much at stake.